That's great. Thanks, Andy, and thanks to the NOG team for inviting me today to give me the opportunity to talk to you all. As Andy said, I'm currently the chair of the Fire and Rescue Sector National Occupational Standards and Qualifications Group. I've been in that group for over 10 years now and have been the chair for just over 2 years, taking over from Richard Hannigan. Three main points I'd like to talk to you about today. Standards, standards, and standards. Okay? Standards from a national occupational standard set the foundation on which we base our roles on. Okay? They are key and fundamental to what we do in our day-to-day role within the UK Fire and Rescue Service. Standards as far as training, as in acquisition, development and competence, are key in making sure that our staff are at the right level and to the highest possible professional standard to deliver what then becomes the service delivery standards that we provide the communities within which we work. So national occupational standards. And they are key for a number of key aspects of both individual and organisational performance. And hopefully as I go through the presentation this morning, you will start to see that these are not just about individual performance of individual people. It's about organisational performance, organisational culture and organisational behaviour as well. The standards themselves furnish a great many aspects within both individual and organisational development. Going back a few years, 2011, Darren Gunter, who is now the Chief of Combined Dorset and Wiltshire, produced the Learning and Development Report for the sector, laying out in quite detailed fashion and in very strong wording the importance to which we perform our professional activities as an organisation, as an emergency service, and more importantly as a fire and rescue service. Things are developing, probably even as we stand here, or you sit here, in how that role and that service delivery will change in the future, and I'll touch on some of that later on. The key messages within that Learning and Development Report were that national standards and guidance should provide a consistent and valid performance benchmark both for the individual and your organisation. And part of the reason I'm stood here today is because we're starting to make those key connections between what is standards and what is performance. Okay? And the national operational guidance is allowing us to have now a vehicle to interpret national occupational standards. And I'll openly put my hand up here. It's not always easy to interpret those standards. They have to be written in a particular language. They have to be open to interpretation, because not only within the sector are we dealing with local authority fire and rescue services, we're dealing with industry and private fire and rescue services, airport fire and rescue services, and the armed forces as well. National occupational standards are at the heart of the national terms and conditions and the set criteria for personnel within the fire and rescue sector to move through their development processes to a level of competence in role. We are clearly aware that the current role maps made up of the current national occupational standards are just having their 10th birthday. That is not forward thinking, okay? They need to be up to date and fit for purpose. As part of my role with the National Occupational Standards and Qualifications Group, I work primarily with the Occupational Committee, which is chaired by Lynn Swift, one of the directors from Buckinghamshire, reporting directly to the CFOA Pod Directorate, the People and Organisational Development Directorate. We have had key meetings now with the NJC from both sides, of the employees and the employer's side, and we are all in agreement that those standards against the role maps need to be updated and brought into the future provision for the UK fire and rescue sector. National occupational standards allow skills areas to be clustered into specific qualifications with potential quality assurance. Quality assurance and quality management will become key in our national professional standing. I think Faye and Bryn touched on it briefly before. Accreditation, okay? And certainly some of the tweaks that I've been picking up from yesterday's activities here around localisms, yeah? And I'm all for localisms. We've got an interpretive aspect to the standards that we set. What we need to make sure is that those localisms still reflect the high standards that this professional sector requires. This is the CFOA organisational competence framework for the sector. 5 key areas within there. Operational competence, okay? And we need to be quite careful in understanding that operational means everybody who does an activity within a fire and rescue service. It can be somebody answering the phone as part of a community safety administration team, through to frontline firefighters, incident commanders, etc. We need to look for outstanding leadership. We need to look at a professional workforce, organisational excellence, and then that sustainable workforce, particularly as we go through the changes that we are at the minute. All of these are underpinned by the National Occupational Standards and Qualifications that the sector provides. Key players in providing those standards and ensuring that the sector understands what they mean and what they can do to providing their staff as individuals and ultimately the organisation as a whole with the right development, with the right support to be the professional organisations that we need to be are Skills for Fire and Rescue, which are our sector skills council. Primarily we were in the Skills for Justice sector, but that has now been taken up by the Skills for Health sector skills council. We're aligning ourselves now initially through the justice sector with the police as an emergency service, and now through health into the ambulance service as well. The Chief Fire Officers Association. Okay, the directorates within the Chief Fire Officers Association are connecting at the highest level to provide guidance and information across the sector to allow us to understand what it means at ground level, at the sharp end, to deliver the service to the highest professional standard. FPF, Fire Professional Framework. Quick poll, put your hands up if you've heard of the Fire Professional Framework. Okay. I am here partly under disguise from Lynn Swift to plug the Fire Professional Framework. I don't disguise that. But just Google it. Go onto Google, put Fire Professional Framework, and it will come up as the first search that comes back. The Sector Skills Council itself, from Skills for Fire and Rescue Service, we all pay into it. We pay £3.75 per person per fire and rescue service for the support and the business management that they provide for us. That involves supporting the development of new standards, the review and update of old standards, working with the NJC, working with the Business Innovation and Skills Department at government level, working with the UK Commission for Employment and Skills, and I'll talk about those a bit later on, but these are key players from a national perspective to allow us to maintain our position as a professional sector. Within a national occupational standards provision, we have to go through a variety of stages to ensure that the outcome and the output of those national occupational standards are fit for purpose, but also fit in with a list of criteria laid down at government level. So we have to map across to what the occupation is about. We have to look at the functional analysis about it. What is it we actually do? How does that then get interpreted to the development of national occupational standards and then going into an approval process? Implementing those national occupational standards has been problematic over the years. We need an aspect or a piece of organisational information in there to give us a better idea of what those standards can be interpreted into in actually the delivery of our service. National operational guidance is what that is. We've worked very closely over the last 18 months or so with the NOG team, and we are so aligned and understanding of this now that I think you'll see some quite dramatic changes over the next few months and into the future on an ongoing basis. NOG gives us that ability to understand the reality of what the standards require. And yes, there has to be flexibility at a local level, but what there shouldn't be flexibility in is the level of the standard of the service we provide. It has to be right up there at the highest level. And then obviously there's a maintenance and relevance and currency of those standards. And yes, maybe that has been lacking, but now we need to get on board with that, and we need to move things forward and continue that aspect around relevance and currency to take us into the future. That's just a screenshot at the minute of what you'll find when you go to the Fire Professionals Framework website. Okay, it is being updated. Okay, we have had a variety of evaluation and feedback processes put in place. We need to reflect more the actual ongoing day-to-day service delivery that the fire and rescue sector does to attract people into this portal. And it is only a portal, it's just a doorway within which we would hope to provide a selection of information, advice and guidance to allow people like yourselves in delivering the service you do, in training providers, in their expectations of what we want as a sector from them, and also to provide individual members of each fire and rescue service to go in and have a true understanding of what their role is and how that fits together with all the other roles within the sector. We are also developing links between this particular site and the NOG site. Okay, so that has taken on an agreement process and we are linking those portals together to make them aligned in that the delivery of the standards through the NOG process will be an ongoing review and evaluation process that is aligned. It works together. So those cycles of review and updating, we were shackled at one point from a National Occupational Standards point of view with regards to the governmental requirement to review National Occupational Standards every 3 years, without question. Those shackles have now been removed and we have the remit within the sector to only review and update them as and when we feel necessary. That allows us to have that alignment with the NOG process of updating and reviewing that as well. The NOG project team are now the key players in some of those key groups that we work with. The Occupational Committee under POD, my group with the NOS and QUALs, and also into the Fire Professional Framework Steering Group. They've actively involved themselves in that, and I thank them for that, and I think that's a massive positive for us as a sector for the future. Equally, the likes of myself and other members of my team within the NOS and QUALs group and the Fire Professional Framework Steering Group are actually involving ourselves not only in other directorates within CFOA, but within the NOG implementation team and various aspects both on a national, regional and local level. So how should it work? Well, it should work that we produce a standard within the sector from a National Occupational Standard perspective as a foundation. That standard should then be interpreted within a fire and rescue service to allow them to deliver the service at the highest professional level to the needs of the communities that we serve and the risks that we find within those communities. It should be as simple as that, and we should be able to align those up and make sure that it's accurate, consistent and transparent. Okay, the 3 key elements of quality management. And part of my role within my group is to work with both fire and rescue services but also awarding organisations such as the IFE, and we'll talk about some of those a bit later on, to allow them to understand what quality management is about and how that can be interpreted in a variety of ways, but still maintains the outcome of the highest professional standard that we can provide. So very much in a joint decision-making process, the right groups are now communicating with each other. We're creating activities and actions around that, but not only that, we are then creating an ongoing review process for future-proofing the standards within the sector and the delivery of those standards out within individual fire and rescue services. So using incident command as a working example, these are the key National Occupational Standards with regards to incident command. And I would certainly hope that you would recognise some of them: WM7, EFSM2 and EFSM1. The CC ones are the civil contingencies National Occupational Standards, which we are also aligning, okay? And I think we also need to make that recognition within the sector that this is what we do, and this is what we do really well. And all the other emergency services are now looking at us with regards to incident command, and they like what they see. how we operate, how we deliver it, but we need to make those key quality management aspects visible and transparent for them as well, to allow them, as we move Jessup forwards, and as we spend more and more time working closer and closer together. I'll just go back on that one, because I was hoping, and unfortunately my technology has let the team down. I was going to show you a brief video here. I noticed on the tweets yesterday you were looking around examples of lessons learned rather than lessons identified. I have some great body-worn video footage from Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service. It is available on our Twitter site at @Hants_fire, so please feel free to go and view it, because on Friday the 13th of May, Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service were called at 5 AM in the morning to a fire in a fireworks shop. Okay. We've had an investigation into that incident, we've had a debrief from that incident, and we found that key aspects from the National Operational Guidance around situational awareness, early evaluation, risk analysis, information gathering, and then intuitive and analytical decision making allowed the outcome of that particular incident to be really successful. Okay, we did what we needed to do. It was a true example of the firefighter safety maxim as well. We risked what we needed to do what needed doing, and the outcome was successful. We are now taking the lessons learned from that incident and the reports around it back into the organisation to create a continuous improvement process, closing the loop on operational assurance. And there are some other good examples across the country. Is anybody from the Welsh Brigades here? Okay, one in the corner. Which particular ones? All of them. Very good. So I've visited a lot of fire and rescue services, but certainly down in the South Wales environment, your incident command training, development and maintenance and competence aspects are directly linked to your operational assurance processes, with key players not only doing training and development and assessment on a simulated environment, but they're also going out into the actual incidents themselves, making assessment decisions in the real workplace at incidents. You couldn't get any better than that, okay? And that is a key aspect to us maintaining the standards, and as Andy said, making sure that what we do for real is reflected in the training and development that we give, and how people reflect that then in their performance out on the incident ground. So qualifications themselves, as I described earlier, the National Occupational Standards are driven through the UK Commission for Employment and Skills. They are the key players in having any national occupational standard published. They do have certain restrictions. The language that is used in those standards has to be a particular language. There has to be an element of interpretation within there to allow those standards to be transferable if necessary. What the NOG provides us with is the detail and the interpretive aspect around us as a specific fire and rescue sector to allow us to deliver the service we know needs delivering against the risks that we encounter. Awarding organisations, such as Roy's from the IFE, and I think SFJ Awards were mentioned earlier. There are other ones, Pearson, as was EdExcel, City and Guilds, etc., all provide an aspect of nationally accredited qualification systems and processes that allow you as individual organisations, or you as individual people, to go through that journey of learning and development into a position of competence at a nationally accredited level. And that again is a key aspect for us as a sector in maintaining that national professional standing. So into the future then. I'm happy to report today that based on those qualifications and the systems that we use now in developing them, we've got some really good connections with some of those awarding bodies, some of which are here today, and I've been yesterday, but also with the likes of SFJ Awards, who have recently put out quite a detailed review of their incident command qualifications. So going through initial, intermediate, advanced and strategic. Hopefully some of you will have been involved in that consultation. I had a conversation just yesterday afternoon with Martin Christie, who is the Qualification Development Manager for SFJ Awards, and he has guaranteed, based on some communication he's had with Andy as well, but also involving Andy's group and Roy from an operations directorate and the National Command and Control User Group. SFJ Awards are clearly aligning their qualifications to the terminology that is now used in the NOG. Okay? So the interpretive aspect of the National Occupational Standards going into a qualification is now going to be reflected against the NOG as well, to make it real. And Martin has given me his solemn promise and ultimately the final say-so on that qualification from me to allow it to be published, to ensure that all the terminology within that qualification is aligned to the NOG. That should make your training, your development and your assessment of competence that bit easier. Okay? But also be aware that there are other opportunities within awarding organisations that if you feel you've got some provision locally, that they can actually send external quality managers out and accredit your local qualifications at a national level within a national sector. And we're involving as many people in that process with the awarding organisations actually who still are active within the sector to make sure that it is up to date, that it is future-proof, and it is at the highest standard and the most modern way of service delivery that we can get. Just also to reiterate that as far as National Occupational Standards developments go, we've just had the information through that we have developed National Occupational Standards against the tactical advisor role. We developed a suite of standards a while ago against wildfire. Does anybody remember those, heard of those, know of those? And there was an aspect within there that was around tactical advice with regards to wildfire. We felt that this was maybe a bit too specific. We've now created generic tactical advisor standards, which could then have the specialism bolted onto it, whether that be wildfire, hazardous materials, water rescue, etc. And in light of that, we've also now had approval from the UK CES, along with the tactical advisor one, for a set of standards involving incidents involving animals, animal rescue as such. And we will be reporting back to the CFO and Animal Rescue Forum next week with regards to that development, and then we will move on to the qualification development behind that. That also aligns with the NOG team's provision of providing national operational guidance against incidents involving animals as well. And all that terminology will then be transferable and accurate, consistent and transparent against that. All I would ask you to do in my parting request is to look at the fire professional framework alongside the NOG and also look at the aspects around information, advice and guidance that you see on there, or actually information, advice and guidance you might be able to provide for others. Okay? Part of the process that we're looking to improve is the communication aspect of it, and it's got to be cyclical. Okay? We can provide stuff, whether it's through subject matter experts or qualification experts or standards experts, etc. But unless we get feedback around whether that's any good or not, or instances where it has worked really well, or equally where it hasn't worked very well, the improvement cycle will be somewhat flawed. So that is my request to you. And on that note, thank you very much for your time.